Your live, interactive, your voice, your future coverage will begin shortly. Your voice, your future coverage with CBS 13 News starts right now.
And good evening, and welcome to our live presentation tonight. Those of you joining us on our websites and on Facebook and on Twitter and wherever else you're joining us from. I am Gregg Lagerquist from CBS 13. I'm joined by Ron Schmidt, a political analyst from the University of Southern Maine, and by Mike Shepard, our longtime collaborator from the Bangor Daily News. Gentlemen, welcome into election night here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
We got a busy one. Mike, let's go ahead and start with you, actually. You've had reporters, as the political editor of the BDN, you've had reporters all over the place today. What's your sense, at least let's start with turnout. You're probably hearing the same things we are, but what's your sense of things today?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I'm just checking my notes here. I mean, we were in Wyndham. We had a reporter talk to a clerk say that this kind of crucial swing suburb is now trending towards 70 or 75% turnout, which is staggering. I mean, those are kind of top tier presidential numbers. At noontime in Buxton, the clerk said they were at 50% with absentee ballots all in. In Waterville, a line snaking through the school where folks were voting at around 5 p.m. Huge. We got a text from a candidate in Fort Kent saying they were already 200 votes over 2018 turnout. So look, I mean, everything we're hearing from folks is just massive. So it's hard to overstate this. I mean, we haven't seen kind of a surprising turnout figure like this, I feel like, in a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this sort of off-year turnout, Maine, obviously, typically, even in off years, is among the tops in the nation for turnout.
Yeah.
But this kind of numbers, I think you hit it. It's rivaling, if not, I don't want to say exceeding, because that's stating it pretty strongly, but rivaling presidential years, which is huge. I do want to say, before I jump over to Ron here, I want to emphasize for all of you who are joining us on Facebook Live and on Twitter and anywhere else on our websites, anywhere else you may be joining us, please let us know in the comments what you're thinking, what you're seeing, what you want to know, what you want to talk about. Again, this is about, 7:50-ish, 7:47. We still got another 13 minutes or so until the polls close. And Pather joining us from Buxton. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So let us know where you're watching from. Jump in, talk to us. What did you see at the polls today? Let us know. What issue was driving you most to vote today? Let us know. If you chose not to vote, let us know why. Although I think anyone tuning in for a political broadcast online right now is probably something very interested in this election tonight. But again, this is about you, Troy. Thank you for joining us from Augusta again. I think Troy was with us the last time, Mike, that we had our live stream as well. So again, let us know. Jump in. This is interactive. This is meant to be for you. If you have a question for us, ask it. We'd love to talk to you. The only thing the proviso I throw out there is keep it clean. Obviously, have a strong opinion. That's always welcome, but please keep it clean. All right, let's bring it over to Ron Schmidt now. Ron from the University of Southern Maine. You and I have been talking for years, obviously during different election cycles. As you hear Mike and I talk about the turnout, maybe to that point or anything else you want to bring up, what really stands out to you on this off-year election?
There's been a lot of talk in this election cycle, and really for the last couple of years at least, about democracy being endangered and the need to take steps to protect democracy. And nothing protects democracy like engaging in democracy. So whatever else happens tonight, I find these numbers incredibly reassuring and invigorating. When I went to vote, I had to get a parking space. People, I live in Freeport, and the turnout there is always strong, but I've never had trouble getting a parking space before. It was awesome.
I actually had the same experience. I live in Scarborough. I voted at the high school today. Now they had the high school in session today, but so the parking lot's usually, fairly filled. But I made the mistake of voting almost exactly at noon today, and with the lunch rush, and it was packed. So that was really gratifying to see. And hello to Sheila joining us right now. She's watching from Milo, joining us from Milo right now. Robin is joining us from St. Albans. So again, we're getting people from all over the place, folks from all over. It's great to see. And again, I think this is a night where I think people are, one, obviously at this point, they want results. There's been a lot of talk in this campaign. They're really eager to see results. And, again, the polls won't close for another 10 minutes or so. So don't expect results from us, the three of us here right now, because we're not going to have them for you. But Mike, maybe lead us into that. Where should people be looking tonight? I know the Bangor Daily News website is very popular on election night to sort of start looking for results and start to see what you guys have. What do you guys plan to present tonight?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of overhauled our results machine to kind of make it easier for people to see what towns are coming in, what towns aren't in yet. Look, we published a list today of the 25 main cities and towns that we're kind of looking at most closely, and this is a mix of bigger towns and towns that kind of can go either way in some of these elections. I mentioned Windham earlier. That's one of the growing Portland suburbs, right? That is very, very politically mixed, almost right down the middle. I think it went for Moody actually in 2018, the Republican nominee Sean Moody against Janet Mills, and then went for Biden 2 years later. So LePage needs to hold his margins close or win in areas like that, or he's not gonna, he's probably not gonna make it. There are other places. Lewiston, of course, I think is the classic. It's the prototypical. It's the second biggest city in the state. It's always politically divided. LePage won that twice. Mills won it in 2018, so we're going to really be watching there. A couple other ones, Sanford, Ellsworth, places like that, where there's been a little bit of a swingy, kind of a swing nature there. So those are a few of them, and even smaller towns like Winslow up here in the Bangor area, Hamden. There are a few places where we kind of expect to see some signals and get an idea of kind of what's going on. Maybe early.
We've been hearing some of the same things. I mean, we talked to, for example, some folks from the LePage campaign. Actually, former Governor LePage himself was saying that he was really heartened to see that some of the smaller towns in Oxford County, Aroostook County, Washington County appear to be running out of ballots like by 5 p.m. And that they took that as a good sign. Jeff, thank you for joining us from Naples, and Laura joining us in Old Orchard. So they took that as a good sign. But we should also say we've seen lines out the door in Portland throughout the various parts, and which is not a good sign for former Governor LePage. So where I grew up in Hollowell, they ran out of ballots as well. So according to where I heard, and that's about as liberal a place as you can get outside of Portland. So again, I think there's it seems like there's high turnout everywhere. We'll see. Yeah, Ron, you obviously are tracking turnout as well. That's something you always do, and you look for some of these districts as well. What stands out to you? Let's start with the governor's race, Ron. What sort of messaging and turnout areas or anything you want to highlight in that race tonight?
One of the things that's interested me for a few months now is the sort of rebranding of Paul LePage. The attempt to walk a line between the governor who served before, who had a very, very solid but not majority base that he could count on to turn out, with a newer, sort of more affable, more party friendly version of Paul LePage, one perhaps less Trumpy. And I feel like in part that's an attempt to figure out where the main Republican Party is going next. And I'm interested to see how that plays out and how it plays out in differing communities. Yeah, and it's definitely a key issue. I mean, I think that obviously we saw in the ads, Democrats wanted to, one of their prevailing themes, especially obviously in the governor's race, was we can't go back. And obviously that morphed to include reproductive rights as we got the Roe v. Wade overturn decision from the Supreme Court this summer. But all along, they were saying, we don't want to go back. Janet Mills' supporters were saying, we can't go back to Paul LePage. And I think that hits on exactly what you were saying. They wanted to sort of paint that picture. So I wonder how much that resonates. I think that certainly that's a key issue. The economy, obviously, though, we talked to a lot of voters. We saw in national polls, we saw in polls here in Maine, that the economy was generally a huge issue for people. And I thought LePage really felt like that was going to be something he could win on. And I guess we'll find out that certainly if he's going to win, it's likely going to be because the economy, is the economy stupid, going back to 1992 and James Carville. It's almost a cliche about midterm elections. I mean, it's the party of the president usually gets a hit during the midterm elections. It's usually seen as an opportunity for voters to kind of express their dismay with anything they didn't like about the presidential administration. And particularly when things go wrong in terms of their economic situation, they look to the president as the person to really hold responsible. So 6 months ago, I was really expecting that to be the central, well, maybe 9, the central story. But as you said, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, there's been other factors that have changed that landscape, but we'll see how much.
Yeah, I mean, that's critical. I mean, we had a number come out today that Kerosene was hitting like $7 a gallon. I mean, I think those kinds of, that's a headwind, obviously, for the party in charge. And it remains to be seen exactly how much that's going to affect local races in the governor's race, but certainly it's having an effect nationally. There's just no denying that. As we look at some video from voters today, hey, I want to play for Mike, our viewers who are joining us on the live stream, and for Ron. We mentioned what the candidates were talking about today. We did have a chance to talk with both Janet Mills and Paula Page today. Let's take a moment to listen to, and Sheila jumping in before I play those sound bites. Let me listen to Sheila saying, my biggest issue to bring me to vote today was to vote for governor. So yeah, Sheila's saying, yeah, that among the many races that were out there, that was the one that she keyed in on. We heard that a lot today, that if there was one race, I mean, obviously it's an off-year election. The president isn't on the ballot. But the governor's race was enough to drive a huge turnout today, at least anecdotally from what we're seeing and hearing. Let's go ahead and listen for a second. First of all, let's listen to what Janet Mills was saying today. She was saying how she felt really energized talking to a lot of different voters today and what they cared about, and her chance to, on this last day, try to shake as many hands, meet as many voters as she could today.
Hearing what's on their minds. There are people in this ward alone, some of whom have lived here all their lives, some of whom I've known for decades, and there are others who are younger and voting for the very, very first time, and they've never seen a governor before, some of them, so it's a thrill.
Talk about grocery bills, heating oil bill, gas bills. I just heard this morning that kerosene's hit over $7. I mean, that's really, really serious.
So there's a couple of things we heard, gentlemen, from the candidates today. As you hear that, again, I guess it's not surprising. I mean, we heard Paula Page wanted to talk about the economy even on the trail today, meeting with voters. I believe that was in Windham. And then we saw Janet Mills meeting with voters. I think that was in, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that was in Lewiston. But again, we heard, my video ran out. I'm literally like running the video here, folks, which I think is scary.
Dangerous game.
Yeah, exactly. We would test my ability to run the technology. Oh, wait, we don't want that view here. Let's go with that. So I guess no surprise. Janet Mills was, she was emphasizing a more general, hey, I want to connect with voters today. I want to hear what they care about. And we heard Paula Page basically saying, it's the economy. I want people talking about the economy. I think that's my winning issue. I guess no surprise there, but we heard it again on the trail today.
Yeah, no, I think there's been a difference too in how you've seen Janet Mills and Jared Golden take this on. The last ad of his campaign was a 60-second spot where literally the first word of the ad was inflation. Governor Mills, I think, has been maybe a little more sensitive to that issue. She has emphasized over the last couple of weeks that this is something that people care about and government needs to offer solutions to it. But it does seem like it's been a little bit of a sore spot for her. And look, it's not easy being the person stuck with the crisis. And for her, right, it's been crisis after crisis, right? Like, just going from one to the other. So, look, I think you've seen a little bit of awkwardness in her trying to downplay sometimes her effect on these things, but also play up, right, the $850 checks that were passed in a bipartisan manner earlier this year. So it's she's walking a pretty fine line on that, I think.
I would agree. I think most voters recognize that there's really somewhat limited what a governor can do, especially when you're talking about national and global, economic, seismic actions between the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the impact that a governor can have in those issues, dramatic interest rate increases from the Fed, but on the other hand, hey, she's the office holder. She's the one in charge. And I think people do, good or bad, they're going to attach blame and credit on the governor's office. Wouldn't you agree, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, it's true what you say. I think voters do understand the limited powers a governor has. But, when you look at survey research data, pollsters ask people how they feel about particular issues. They don't ask you, what did you think of the Senate bill to change monetary policy? They ask you how you feel about the economy right now. And if people are feeling upset or particularly uncomfortable, anxious, worried about the economy, that's going to be something which very often is taken out on the incumbent. They're the one who's in charge of the situation.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to what Mike was just saying about Jared Golden's campaign. I think he's very sensitive to that, and he wants to tout the fact that, hey, I voted against the Build Back Better bill. I think he was the only Democrat in the House. Am I correct on that one, to vote against that bill? He also voted on a couple of occasions to sort of buck that. And at the time when he was voting against that, he said, hey, I buy the argument that we heard from like Joe Manchin, another, blue dog Democrat, to use an old school term there, a more moderate conservative Democrat, saying, hey, I'm concerned about inflation. I can't really support this. Joe Manchin ended up coming around, they kind of sweetened the pot for him. But I think Jared Golden kind of walked that line. He recognized that inflation is going to be a real tough issue, and the headwinds are going to be real strong, especially in the midterm. And if you're a congressman in the 2nd District of Maine, one of the most purple districts in America historically, you better know, what the issue is going to be, and make it clear to the voters that you get where they're coming from and you get their pain. And I think we heard from him. Hey, I do want to mention it is now officially 8:00, gentlemen. The polls are closed. The voting of 2022 is in the books, at least, the actual standing in line. Although I do want to say, anyone still in line right now who got there before the polls closed, they do legally have the right to vote. But here we are. The polls are closing. So big night and huge turnout. I think it's going to be a while. I won't ask you guys for predictions because it's 8:01 and ask you for. But 2nd District of Maine, Ron, I'll start with you. Everyone seems to think this is going to go to ranked choice, just as it did in 2018 when it was the exact same 3 candidates: Jared Golden, Bruce Poliquin, Tiffany Bond. I imagine we're thinking probably the same thing this time.
I'm guessing, but I learned a very important lesson in 2016. Don't guess on live television.
That's right. I try. Exactly. It's a lesson I've internalized, but
it's a similar set of circumstances. Jared Golden is good at managing that district, but Bruce Poliquin has experience there as well. I don't know what. It's a hard call, I think.
I would agree, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys on that. I think there are a lot of factors, right? I think Jared Golden's going to do much better than a normal Democrat would do in that district. I think the national shift toward Republicans may play a little bit harder in that district. So I think there are kind of confounding factors there that are going to make this really close. And I don't see how it ends in a result tonight. We do have some of our first results in, and Paul LePage is leading by 3 votes with let me do some quick math, 28 votes in, and we've also got Jared Golden leading as well. So very small sample. We're talking
tiny
like
sample,
couple little towns. But I think what it shows you, right, is that if Jared Golden's going to win this, right, he's got to bring home some of those LePage voters, and that's going to be, I think, the real big theme in that race.
Yeah, I know LePage's people are really paying close attention. For example, they'd love to see, at least parity in terms of the turnout in the 2nd District versus the 1st District, and if it's higher than parity in the 2nd District, that's a great sign for the LePage campaign. Similarly, obviously, Janet Mills is saying, hey, the higher the turnout is, for example, in Portland, you mentioned Hollowell, some of those other communities. Where historically there's obviously been a very, very high Democratic vote, when those numbers start coming in, that's a great sign for her. So it's difficult to say. I do want to put the caveat to those who are, again, just joining us on our live stream here. I'm joined by Ron Schmidt from USM and by Mike Shepard from the BDN. I'm Gregg Lagerquist from CBS 13. If you're joining us on our live stream, please interact with us. Let us know what you're wondering, what you're thinking. But a caveat as the night goes on and we start getting some results in and you see the number of precincts reported, it's really hard to tell, okay, if that's one precinct with 12 votes is one precinct versus one precinct with, 10,000 votes is one precinct. So you can't really read too much into the percentage of precincts reporting, at least, especially early on. You got to really know, okay, where are they coming from? And does it deviate from some of the things we've seen in the past, which is kind of, a little bit of an arcane science, but we'll see how the numbers, but the more numbers come in, the better we're going to get as far as the statistics go to getting more reliable outcomes here.
That's right.
Well, gentlemen, Ron, let me throw this to you because we haven't talked about the 1st District race yet. And I think it's for good reason. I know Shelley Pingree is going for her 8th term. She was first elected in the fall of 2008, I believe. So, and I think the polls, if you were to ask me, where would you put a poll with Shelley Pingree running against candidate, X from the Republican Party? She always seems to be right around that 57, 58, 59%, almost no matter who the opponent is. We've seen that historically, ebbs and flows, sometimes above 60%, often just below. And I think the most recent poll we saw from UNH had her at 59% that came out over the weekend. So Ron, anything, I don't want to not talk about that race, but you expect any surprises at all in her race against Ed Thielander?
No, I don't.
There we go. There's the answer.
I was thinking before when we were talking about the second district and Representative Golden's strategy. I heard Mark Kelly, the senator out of Arizona, on the radio this morning talking, and I feel like we're seeing the Biden administration allowing Democrats to kind of run against the president in these elections, which tell you a couple of things. They tell you that the White House is uncomfortably aware of how unpopular President Biden is right now, and that can be a drag on his party, and that they're trying to minimize any negative repercussions of that. We'll see if that strategy works. I very much believe that Representative Golden could make that work. I think it's probable that Senator Kelly, a former astronaut, could make it work. But I have no idea what things are going to look like in the morning, or even in the morning in a couple of days. But I am curious to see how that strategy plays out in Congress.
Yeah, I almost feel they had to do that, right? Especially in those swing districts. I mean, you've got a handful of U.S. Senate races. Well, we can list them: Nevada, Pennsylvania, Georgia. Relatively close races in Ohio, although that seems like in the last week or two, it seemed to be tilting back towards the Republican there. And you mentioned Arizona as well. So you run the math. You listen to the national pundits who are running all of this data on what they're seeing. It looks like the Democrats' chance to hold the Senate nationally. And of course, there's not a race in Maine, U.S. Senate. There is one over the border in New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan looking for re-election against Don Bolduc. So it looks really narrow for Democrats to retain control of the Senate. I mean, no, that's not really on the radar here in Maine as much, but that's certainly on the national radar.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I'm trying to say if we have any more people kind of jumping in and talking to us. Hey, I want to remind everyone it's 8:07. The polls have closed at this point. The Bangor Daily News is going to have coverage. Mike Shepard joining us here from the BDN. Ron Schmidt joining us from USM. Quick word about our coverage tonight. As you see, this is our website up. We're going to have results coming in as well throughout the evening. And you can go to our website, WGME.com, to get results there. You can also go to the BDN's website to get results throughout the evening. Ron from USM here is going to be joining me on the air. We'll be on the air on Fox 23, our normal time at 10 o'clock. We'll also be doing cut-ins, to use a term to art for TV. Well, basically, obviously, we break in for a few minutes here and there. So Ron will be joining me for some of that as well. We'll be doing full coverage on CBS 13 as well. Full coverage at 11 o'clock. And every half hour, right on the 25. So 8:25 will be the first one coming up here fairly shortly. And then 8:55, 9:25, and throughout until we go into the newscast, we'll be breaking in live. So there's a lot of coverage still ahead here tonight. A lot of talking by the likes of me. And Mike, why don't you give us a little bit more? Because I know you got to jump off and talk to some other folks here in a moment too. But where can people what's your focus tonight, and where can people follow you guys?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is obviously fastest results in the state. We collect them separately from the Associated Press, so we and have different partners in calling races. We work with a national group called Decision Desk HQ. They were actually the first to call the 2016 and 2020 presidential races. So, those you see the results page on our site there right in front of us here, and if you click on the races, you get to see kind of a town by town picture. Yep. So you can kind of scroll through there and see, search for your county, your town, and figure out how things are going.
One town in Hancock County
that's right. Yeah.
Results.
That's right. And it should be a fun night. I think it's going to be a late one. I think we'll still be figuring things out tomorrow, but we'll be here for the duration.
Yeah, and we've heard as well. I mean, it's not surprised. We mentioned the whole thing about ranked choice voting and how if it's close enough, no candidate in federal races get to 50% plus one vote. It goes to ranked choice. All signs say that that's probably what's going to happen in the second district, just as it did in 2018. By the way, I think we said it on an earlier broadcast that we did with Mike and I, that Maine's Constitution, you cannot do that in the governor's race under the Maine Constitution. So there's no ranked choice voting in the governor's race. Sam Hunkler, obviously, is the independent there. He's not expected to be a major factor. I don't want to say well, the polls are closed. I guess I can be a little bit more, say a little bit more than I would before the polls closed. He's been around 2%, 1, 2, maybe 3% in the polls that we've been seeing. That's hard to believe that could be a factor unless it's really close, which it can be. But regardless, there's no ranked choice voting in Maine for the governor's race. So Ron, before we sort of wrap, we got to wrap this up in the next few minutes. Closing thoughts for our live stream audience here.
I just keep thinking about Betty Davis and All About Eve. Everyone should fasten their seatbelts because it's going to be a bumpy night.
I agree.
There's some areas where we know exactly what to expect, but there's enough surprises out there that I'm not planning on getting much sleep tonight myself.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hey, gentlemen, real fast, because I see that our good friends Dan Lamparello and Owen Kingsley. It's funny because this is new to me. There's a bar here where I can see the different video and the different people joining us. It carried over to the next one, and I didn't see that they're there. Dan, can you hear us? We've got Ron and Mike here. Now we have Dan, and I'm actually going to pop up Owen Kingsley too. It's going to be like the Brady Bunch here. Let's start with you, Dan. Dan, you're at the Mills campaign headquarters in Portland. Tell our voters and viewers, what are you seeing?
We're at Aura in Portland for the Maine Democratic Party headquarters with Janet Mills and Shelley Pingree. We're going to have their watch party. The doors just opened about 20 minutes ago, so people are starting to file in. It's been a little slow so far, but we've been able to talk with a few of the people from the campaign, and they seem pretty hopeful here so far.
All right, Dan, thanks so much. And Owen Kingsley joining us now from Lewiston. He's up with the LePage campaign. What are you seeing up there right now, Owen?
Yeah, thank you, guys. Obviously, I'll give you just a little quick sweep of the room here. It's still a little quiet here in Lewiston, as you mentioned. Former Governor Paul LePage's campaign headquarters here. People are just starting to kind of file in. We are still obviously waiting for the man of the hour. We were able to speak with him a little bit earlier. We'll share some of that, as you mentioned, in the TV-style cut-ins that we have coming up. We'll hear a little bit from LePage, but I will say he is feeling very confident after speaking with his campaign last night in a rally in Scarborough. They wouldn't comment, saying they're focusing on these last few hours of campaigning tonight. He's feeling much more confident. I'll get into a little few of those details of why he feels that way coming up a little later tonight.
Wonderful. Owen Kingsley, live in Lewiston. Dan, any final thoughts from you before I let you go? Because I know you got some coverage to do here coming up.
No, I mean, we'll be covering both the governor's race here for Janet Mills on that side. Obviously, Owen's up in Lewiston covering the LePage camp, but then we'll also have the first district results coming in down here too. I believe I've heard that Shelley Pingree's in the house here already, so I'm sure we'll be hearing from her pretty soon.
All right, Dan Lamparello and Owen Kingsley, part of our coverage tonight on CBS 13 and Fox 23 of the governor's race. Gentlemen, thank you so much, and apologies. This is what happens when you leave me in charge of deciding which videos and live streams I click on. So, gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate you guys jumping in here, and we'll let you go. All right, Ron and Mike, I'll let you guys go here in a second as well. But any thoughts? I don't think we heard any wonderful, huge insights from Dan or Owen there, other than, hey, people are starting to trickle in, and that is one big change from 2020. We've got in-person campaign events again tonight.
That's right. And the weather, I mean, today was a little chilly here at the tail end, but there was a great last weekend for canvassers, and you wonder how that changes things, right? People got a little more time on the trail, maybe a little more comfortable interacting with folks outside, and I think this is going to be a really, really long and maybe surprising and mixed night. We'll see soon enough.
Ron, your closing thoughts before we sort of tag off on the live stream here.
I'm just waiting here to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's really hard to make sort of bold analysis when it's 8:13 and looking again back to the BDN's website where they have 0.2% reporting, which again is actually inflating what it is overall, because we're really talking about like 28 votes. So, but hey, that's the beauty of some of these smaller towns. If they can count their votes super fast, they can send them in and they're done. They're done. For those clerks are already heading home. So good for them. Well, Ron Schmidt, Mike Shepard, I really appreciate both of you guys joining us here tonight for this live stream tonight. Again, I hope anyone watching us online right now, I hope we answered some of your questions. Stay with CBS 13 and Fox 23 and with our partners at the Bangor Daily News throughout election night and beyond, because it's going to definitely be beyond, especially if these ranked choice votes in the second district continue on. That could be next week before we know results. That's sort of what happened in 2018, so it could be a repeat of that. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a blast. And again, stay with our coverage throughout the evening. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
This has been live, interactive, your voice, your future coverage from CBS 13 and Fox 23. Make sure to stay connected with CBS 13 and Fox 23 on air, online, and through these social channels. Thank you for watching.